Okay, a week without sugar. 1 whole week. So minus sugar equals plus 1.8 on my scale this morning. Hello, fat acceptance movement. Here I come. Hello, this is Pat Coakley, and this is episode 128 of Podsnacks, Art of the Diet. And today we're going to talk, and at least initially for the first 4 or 5 minutes, about my week without sugar. And then the last few minutes will be about fat shaming, which came in the guise this past week of fat shaming the President of the United States, which I have no sympathy for him. But I just think anyone with a weight problem and struggling with a weight problem over the years has to look at this past week of fat shaming this particular man and have a few thoughts on it, which I'll have. But first, let me talk about the week without sugar. So, my week without sugar, here's what happened. I didn't have any. I didn't have any in the snacks. I didn't cook with it. Nothing in my coffee or tea. The closest I got to sugar was the Caltrate vitamin gummy thing that I don't yet have a sugar-free substitute for. But I did notice that without it, I didn't crave it as much. But also, by afternoon, I was sort of looking for that kick that I rely on to get me through the rest of the day, to figure out different projects, the whole 9 yards. So I didn't have that, and I missed it. And I missed it, day 1 through day 7, okay? But what I believe I did do was compensate for that loss by increasing the carbohydrate intake. And my Instant Pot, which I'm now just such a master of, makes wonderful brown rice. I think I overdid it with that. I think I overdid it with, whole wheat bread, crackers. I think that whole food group there is, in fact, probably more lethal to me than just the sugar. And this is based on experience because a couple of years back, I went without bread and without sugar for months, really months, and could absolutely see the benefit of it not being in my body on a daily basis. I simply didn't dwell on food as much or look to it to try to, be a mood-altering substance. But I did notice, it was very starkly clear to me, without grains, without sugar, the tendency to look to food to try to be a mood-altering thing. I can clearly see it when it's out of my system. I don't see it as well when it's in my system. It sort of masks itself as hunger when it's in my system. But when it's not, and you're eating the proper combination of proteins and fruits and good carbs. I'm not doing an all protein thing at all during this time. But when you do it right, you realize that your moods are looking for some alteration that is not metabolically available in a chickpea. Okay? So I decided, what am I going to do about this following week? Am I going to let go the sugar thing, or am I going to, moderate, back to trying to moderate the breads and the sugars? And I thought, no, let me go another week without sugar, but add the no grains in and just see if I can do it, number one. And number two, just see what effect that has on me in the long run. So that's my goal for this week, is to add just another huge food group not to be available to me. And hopefully my compensatory powers will not, return the same result on the scale next week. So I'll get back to you about that. Okay, so now let's talk about the birther movement. Not the birther movement. That's what this is that's what inspired this term, the girther movement. So it came about because the president wanted his physician to report publicly about his medical results. And there were people who just simply didn't believe this physician, felt that the results showed he had more heart disease than the physician was admitting to, and most centrally felt that he was not accurately represented with respect to his weight and with respect to his BMI. These folks decided to call themselves the girther movement, and under the guise, just as the birther movement had been under the guise of legitimacy, getting a legitimate document of President Obama's birth certificate, and despite seeing a birth certificate, a legitimate birth certificate, for President Obama, still didn't believe that certificate and thought it was a lie. These girther folks feel that the president's weight and height are not accurately represented as they should be. And so they are demanding, I don't know whether they're demanding a public weigh-in or some other doctor of their choice would do the weigh-in. I don't know. But when I initially heard of it, it sort of made me smile, just the name of it. And then I realized what all this fat shaming thing was about. It was they felt free to do all of this toward him, just as President Trump had felt that it was just fine for him to delegitimize President Obama in the birth certificate. Just felt that he had the right to do it, and he was going to do it regardless of what the facts were. So I started looking at these folks in a way that may surprise you. I find no more despicable human on the planet than this man. But the girther movement reveals a very dark side to me of the whole American focus on fatness. And I think what it reflects to me is that of all the things this man is, these folks are trying to say, but he's also fat, in a way that is really gonna nail him to the wall. As if that is the worst thing that could be said about him. And I thought, oh, good grief. Here we have someone who lies about everything, and folks are going to spend a lot of time on revealing that he may lie about his weight. I'm like, oh, Lord. The priorities here are somewhat daunting. And besides which, lying about one's weight, if indeed he and the doctor were in cahoots about not putting him into the obese BMI category, and apparently being moderately obese was all right for him. Even if that happened, haven't you done it? I know I have. Misrepresented those facts. Avoided those facts. Lied to myself primarily, but if I could, I would get away with it at different points with others. And so I thought, boy, this is one behavior that I may have in common with this loathsome human being. And then, you listen and they're saying, well, he doesn't like to exercise, and that's worse than being a racist, that you don't like to exercise. How many Americans don't like to exercise? I think quite a few. And then I read some statistics where a third of Americans were classified as overweight, and another third were classified as obese. So that means that 2/3 of Americans, so we're talking over 200 million people. It seems like really a lot to say it like that, doesn't it? Are overweight, just like Donald Trump. And so those who support him politically, some of the polls say 35% of the American voting public, he actually has a plurality. 70+% of American citizens are overweight like Donald Trump. So here's my solution to this girther movement. Knock it off. Focus in on all the other stuff he does. You could have focused in on the fact that he just paid off an adult porn star for not disclosing that he had an extramarital affair with her. Isn't that more revealing about his character than the number on the scale or his BMI? Really? But Here's my little cynical, whimsical solution to this whole thing. That we know a year ago when he forced his spokesman to go out there, that Sean Spicer, and to say that there was an historic turnout at that inauguration. Historic, they said. Never so many people at an inauguration. And meanwhile, you could clearly see from the photos that there just weren't all that many people there. And I think if they invited all the overweight Americans to Washington, 70+% of Americans, and he could speak to them at the Lincoln Memorial, and he would indeed have a historic turnout. So that is my Lucy 5 cents for this week as I look forward, she said very unconvincingly, of a week of no sugar, no grains. And it sounds like a reggae song. But I'll report back next week, and hopefully your week went better than mine. And as always, I appreciate you listening, and I'm over at facebook.com/Art of the Diet, trying to figure out the group thing, so come on over. And my email is artofthediet@gmail.com. And thanks for listening. See you next week.